Hello, hello. Welcome to today's session of Selling the Couch. I hope you are doing well, having an awesome day. So, once in a while, when I get really brave, I like to do episodes like this, which is basically an episode of, hey, this is kind of an update on my life and my business. And here's some of the stuff that I am kind of crash test dummying and try to figure out. And this is one of those updates. Before we get into the content of the update, just a core idea that I would love for you to keep in mind during this entire session, which is the parts of our field that can be automated will be, especially with AI, getting more and more into our lives and becoming more and more a part of our lives. The parts that can't, human, experiential, irreplaceable, that's where the future is. And this episode is an honest look at my journey and trying to figure out what this looks like in my own life as a licensed psychologist. I wanted to start with a question, which is, have you truly ever been in the zone? Not just performing well, but in it. Time slows down, instincts get ahead of your thinking, and often your thinking quiets down. You feel shockingly alive. I've been there, and I've been on the exact opposite end of it as well. I've shared this previously in some episodes, but growing up, I played a lot of basketball. My NBA dreams were quite quickly dashed because I'm between 5'10 and 5'11, but I knew that I was probably not going to go beyond just playing like local rec leagues. And also the church that I grew up in, we used to do these like regional basketball tournaments. And so the every summer we would spend training and running scrimmages and running plays and dialing in exercise and all sorts of stuff to get ready for this one tournament. And we would play against like six or seven other churches that were in either in Texas or Oklahoma. And I remember one of those regional tournaments I was playing, and it was the end of the game, and I needed to make one free throw. I got to the line. There were just like 2 seconds left, 2 or 3 seconds left in the game. We were down by one, and I got fouled, and I needed to make just one free throw to tie it, and then two free throws to win the game. All of this summer, we had worked so hard, and so it all came down to these last two free throws. I stepped to the line, time slowed down. I heard the cheering, but then it got like eerily quiet, but not really in a good way. Right before I released the first shot, in my mind, I saw this flash of a ball missing and just clanking off the rim before I even shot it. And it happened exactly in that way. Not for one shot, but for both shots because I was clearly rattled after that first shot. We lost, and all of that hard work, it felt over. And I remember, like, you know, teammates coming up to me and said, "Mel, it's not your fault. Like, we could have played better. We could have, there was so many other factors, but I was so hard on myself and I took so much responsibility for that. Now, year 2, actually this happened the following year, which kind of was this weird situation, but same tournament, similar moment, 2 free throws in a playoff game, and I stepped to the line again. Time slowed down, but this time I wasn't thinking about the result at all. I was just present. The ball went in and we won. We ended up winning the game. This is a question that I have never stopped thinking about since then. How does the same person who has the same hands, who has the same pressure, how does in year 1 saw myself failing before I failed, but in year 2 wasn't thinking about the outcome at all? What was the difference? And it wasn't just skill or effort or preparation. It was something that was happening beneath all of that. Something in my own nervous system. and something that predetermined the outcome before the ball left my hands. I've been trying to understand that gap for most of my adult life. I think it's part of why I became a psychologist, and I started grad school in 2005, and sports psychology was just starting out. And if I had known that this would be a field where it has blossomed the way it has, I would have definitely, I think, become a sports psychologist because I absolutely love the intersection of sports and psychology. But it's definitely something that I am focusing on and building right now. So before we go kind of in the deep stuff and what I'm learning and the mistakes that I'm making, all of that stuff, I wanted to zoom out for a second before we go down and I just share sort of my own journey because there's something that's happening in our field now. And I'm honestly still working through how I think about it. And I know some of this will evolve as new data comes in. But AI is coming for the replaceable parts. I've been paying attention to how AI is moving across not just our field, but across different domains. And I interestingly came across a graph recently had that made me pause, and I've actually referenced it and looked at it several times and shared it with a few friends. It's titled Theoretical Capability and Observed Usage by Occupational Category. Basically, it's a radar chart that maps two things across every major field. So in blue, which it shows what AI is theoretically capable of doing in that specific field. In red, it shows what AI is actually being used for right now. And what the graph shows is fields like legal or business or finance, computer, math. The blue line or the blue cluster and the red are really close together. AI is already being used near its theoretical ceiling in those fields. But what's interesting for us is fields like social services, life and social sciences, healthcare, the blue shape, the potential is already significant. The red shape, the current usage is still really small. And here's the thing, that gap isn't comfort. That gap is what's coming. The capacity and the capability already exists. The deployment is just starting to catch up. I wanted to share this because it started, I've gone down this lots of conversations, gone down lots of rabbit holes about what this makes me think about for our field as clinicians. You probably know this, you likely know this, but insurance companies are likely already training AI models for first line therapy. Maybe not fully deployed yet, but it's not very far because it's a lot easier to have an AI model trained in some basic psychological interventions than it is to reimburse a clinician to do therapy. And it's more cost effective, right? And honestly, for certain kinds of care, it might be adequate. That's uncomfortable to say, but I think it's true. The part of our work that is transactional, protocol driven, or replicable, those are the parts that are the most exposed to AI. So the question that I'm sitting with and I keep sitting with is what can't be replaced? One, I think it's human presence, the connection that when you're sitting across the room from another human being and you're sharing deep and very vulnerable moments of your life, that connection that exists there. Another thing I think is a nervous system that is attuning to another nervous system, being able to pick up nuances. The other thing is an experience, something that happens in a body, in a place, in real time. And what I've really been thinking about is this intersection of how do you create these experiences, not just in the therapy room, but beyond it. I've shared this in our weekly newsletter, but back in September, I started learning to play golf. So I've been wanting to learn to play golf since I was in the third grade, but child of immigrant parents, our family couldn't really afford a lot of, the costs of playing golf. And frankly, growing up outside of Dallas, I didn't even know public courses existed because there definitely weren't any that I knew of around where we lived. Even middle school, high school, rec leagues, none of that offered golf that I knew of. But it's a game that I've been really interested in and fascinated by for a long time. So since September, I've been taking weekly lessons. I told my executive assistant starting in January I wanted to train for golf, much in the same way that I built STC, sort of brick by brick, but thoughtfully and intentionally. So at this point, I am training somewhere between 10 and 13 hours a week. And with recovery and all of the other hip mobility and yoga and flexibility and saunas and cold plunges and all that stuff, I'm around about 20 hours a week focused on this. And the reason I share that is one of the reasons I'm coming to realize the golf course is so interesting because it's essentially a laboratory where the data tells the truth that your words don't. And I'll share more about what I'm thinking in that way. But the big thing is the future of our field is in the irreplaceable. Not the therapy hour as a unit of care, but experience where performance and mental health are addressed together. That's what I'm starting to believe, and that belief is driving a lot of what I'm building for right now. Now, if you're listening to this and you're a clinician, I'm not saying private practice is going away. In fact, I imagine the needs will continue to increase more and more. What I am saying is the most interesting opportunities are actually at the edges where clinical skills meet something no algorithm can touch. Some of us and some of you that are listening already feel that pull. And specifically, this episode is for you. Just to give a short background on me, I'm a licensed psychologist. I have been licensed since 2012. I started in undergrad in the year 2000. I started grad school in 2005. So if you really think about undergrad, 26 years now in the field and seeing sort of evolutions and changes and all of those kind of things. Uh, I have, gotten quite a, over easily over 10,000 clinical hours at this point. And a lot of my training was even beyond typical like community mental health. I did university counseling centers and VAs and a whole host of different things. And my clinical road, there were two things that have kind of shaped how I'm thinking about stuff now, which is during my pre-doctoral internship, I did part of my rotation at the VA where I worked in the polytrauma clinic. And so this is basically traumatic brain injury plus post-traumatic stress disorder. I specifically worked with a lot of special forces. I saw up close how the most highly trained humans on earth both train, but they also how they still dysregulate under pressure. It wasn't necessarily a weakness at all. It was more biology. And when I was completing both my internship and my postdoc at Vandy, I worked with a lot of Division One athletes. I worked with a lot of high achieving, high pressure individuals, faculty, staff, students, the whole gamut. And when I finished up my postdoc and we decided to move to and settle in Philly, I started at a group practice and I naturally gravitated toward working with athletes and founders and executives and high stake professionals. And if I'm being honest, for me, sitting across from capable people and watching them try to understand why they can't access their capability when it counts, that free throw story, I lived the research question before I even studied it, and I'm still living it. Golf has become my new laboratory. Uh, Again, more on that in a moment, but the golf course is so interesting because there are so many factors on it that you can't control, right? Like the weather or somebody making a noise or, a pressure putt situation or there's some kind of bump in, as you're putting it, there's some kind of weird bump or a weird divot which is basically like a little hole or indentation, and there's some weird divot and it messes up the trajectory of your ball. So what I've come to realize is, and I'm just in these 7 months of uh, of taking lessons is golf doesn't create pressure, it reveals it. The course is a real time mirror about how your attention operates under stress, how you recover after errors, whether you force control when things go sideways, and more importantly, your relationship to control. What your nervous system does in your body when the stakes feel high. You can't rationalize a missed putt. You can't intellectualize a shaking hand as you line up on the first tee about to hit a driver. Your body tells the truth even when your mind is just trying to protect you. That's the laboratory that I have been looking for. And specifically, three things that I am starting to think about as I delve back into clinical work. As you know, I've created several videos on this, but after the pandemic, I went full time with selling the couch. I had slowly pulled back from clinical work for years, especially after our daughter was born 2 months premature, and I realized that I really wanted to be there for her practically because also she needed a year of early childhood intervention with PT because she was not sitting up on her own. And so I started really designing my business around the life that I wanted to live and just being present dad. Uh, but there's always been a part of me that missed the clinical side. At first, I created two videos. It's a little embarrassing, but they're on the YouTube channel. You can watch them. First of them is like, hey, I think I'm going to go back to private practice. And then, like, several months later, hey, I don't think I'm going to go back to private practice. And part of that was me realizing there's such levels of complication with the private practice model. And then also in the season of life that I was in. Um, I started thinking about clinical work. I kept hitting a wall. It wasn't that I didn't want to do clinical work. It was that the private practice model, the 1 hour, that sort of framework, I kept imagining didn't fit into my life. Two businesses. We've got aging parents. My wife's parents are in their 80s. My parents are about a decade behind, and I've got a family and a life that I've worked really hard to build over these past several years. And one thing I've realized is with the traditional, 45, 50-minute hour, private practice, you can set your own schedule, but your schedule gives itself to private practice. And especially because you're often seeing clients, week after week, right? And I've already learned the hard way what it costs not to protect your capacity. And if I'm being honest, there were other reasons too. Genuinely, running two businesses is very demanding. Again, aging parents, so there's doctor's appointments and other complications that are both here and coming down the pipeline. And I made a deliberate decision to protect my capacity for what mattered most. So when I started thinking about returning to clinical work, I had to reconcile something because those things are still true. Parents are still aging, STC is still running, life still feels full. So I started asking a different question, not how do I go back to clinical work, but what model of clinical work fits the life that I actually want to live? And that one question, as simple as it is, it really changed how I started thinking about it. Again, I wasn't against clinical work. I was against a model that would consume what I had worked so hard to protect, which was margin. So, what I'm building now is called the Quiet Approach, and it is essentially a 2 day golf focus performance retreat for people who have to remain extremely calm because of the pressure that is all around them, but they notice that they're crumbling in high stakes and high pressure moments. I am planning to do about 4 to 8 of these 2 day retreats a year, and it's completely designed around my life, not the other way around. And honestly, I don't think I could have done this in the early days of STC. I'm 11 years now into it. Built a lot of systems. I have a great executive assistant who works behind the scenes to make sure everything kind of runs as smooth as possible. I and I didn't change my mind about what I wanted to protect. I just finally designed something that didn't require me to sacrifice it. So, if you're listening and you're a therapist, many of you are feeling a version of this restlessness. You're not burned out necessarily by the work, you're burned out by the mold or by the model. And those are very different problems and they have very different solutions. The model you return to doesn't have to be the one that you left. So, point two that I wanted to talk about is what I'm actually building and why. I wanted to be about, fully transparent with where I am with everything. So the quiet approach is not fully launched. I've been building it very carefully. I'm working with a small business attorney right now. I'm getting the legal infrastructure right, entity structure right, liability insurance, all of that. Running everything with through the psych board to make sure everything's on par. Doing this work slowly and intentionally and the the quiet approach, as I mentioned, it's basically a 2-day retreat. It's going to be held at the club that I'm based out of. It's designed but it has the versatility for me to do this at any club pretty much in the world over time. It's designed for high performers who crumble internally when the pressure arrives. So folks like surgeons and pilots and founders and professional golfers and future professional golfers, executives, people whose best thinking keeps happening after the moment that it mattered. The way that I'm even starting to think about this, one of the initial questions I was really thinking about was, okay, I built a really nice pace to my life. And what do I want? How do I build this so that it keeps that pace? So, my plan right now is to confine this to Wednesdays and Thursdays. And each day, basically from like 9 to 4. So, 9 to 4, from 9 to 4:15. And so, each day unfolds through 5 chapters. So the first chapter is basically what we're calling a tune, which is basically we're getting heart rate variability baselines. So basically, where is the nervous system weather report before anything begins? So, for example, like high HRV, regulated and flexible, low HRV means under strain, and we're looking at patterns. I'm actually measuring this through a couple of heart rate variability monitors. I'm getting certified through HeartMap, which is a institute out in California. They do a lot of 30 plus years of research into heart rate variability, heart rate testing, all of that stuff. And I've got a sensor that's through them, which is like an ear sensor. So I'm connecting it to folks that are going to be part of this experience to get like a baseline read of where their stress levels at. We also have some questions that I'll kind of debrief some little things that I'll show them in terms of deep breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, that kind of stuff, box breathing, bunch of stuff like that. The second chapter is called Surface. And so this is basically on the golf course. So on day one, we're doing 9 holes. On day two, this is a short game pressure lab. So putting, chipping, all of that stuff. Not there to keep the score, but there to observe how your body, mind, and it are handling the stress. So they're actually during this time, they're actually wearing a chest heart rate variability monitor. So we're actually seeing how stress is showing up, but we're also having conversations and I'm observing things that are happening and they're observing it in themselves. Chapter 3 goes to Nourish, which is basically a private curated lunch, a debrief of what the course just revealed. And then 4 is Release. And so I just got certified and went through my level 1 brain spotting training. I anticipate doing some more levels down the line as it's necessary. But I'm going to do a brain spotting session targeting the specific block that the data identified of where they're crumbling when the pressure holds. And then chapter 5 is restore. So I found actually a private sauna cold plunge. You get a private suite. They go into there for an hour and get to wind down their nervous system. Day one, the way I'm thinking about it is what I call revelation. So, what's actually happening inside of you. And then day two is integration. So, working with it under contained pressure. And so there's a bunch of really cool stuff that we're still figuring out, but they get a private nervous system protocol. So it's printed, it's bound. They get a photo book that chronicles their day. They get an idea of what their pressure triggers are. We're doing a couple of different scales. One is the Big Five. The other is Angela Duckworth's work on grit. So there's actually a grit scale. All of that stuff is integrated, and it's basically a synthesis or a report of how pressure shows up for them on the golf course, how it aligns with their personality, and how they should best show up both on the golf course and whatever they do in their career. So in terms of and it's all going to be custom built for, each person that's going through. So where I am in this build is very early. So this summer, we actually have two beta participants that are testing the curriculum. I'm sure there's going to be changes and things that I'll have to account for. In the late summer and early fall, I'm actually doing it with two paying clients. And so this will also give me some time to set up all the legal and the business infrastructure as well. And next year, my hope is to do around 3 to 5 retreats. And then over full capacity, what I'm thinking is somewhere between 8 and 10, if it does to get to that capacity. I mean, I may be like, hey, 4 or 5 is really good. And that feels like a good season. I want to do this in a way that feels like I don't want it to just do a whole bunch of retreats, and I want every person that's going through it to feel like, man, I am so glad I did this. And the point of this is the golf course is the lab, the data is the mirror, and the retreat is the actual intervention. Now, here's the other thing I've been really thinking about. And, with AI, I think we started conversation this episode talking about what is not replaceable. And my thought is like experiences, right? Genuine connection will be one of the hardest things to replace, the human connection. And one of the things I've been sitting with is why this specific thing and why this specific way. And I say this with humility, not to brag or anything like that, but I think sometimes like just hearing from folks who are thinking through this and how they're thinking about it can be helpful. And so, why me? Why now? Why golf? And I think the honest answer is this is the only thing I could build that, it's going to be really hard for somebody to replicate. What do I mean by that? So I've got 13 plus years as a licensed psychologist, um, and I've got 10,000 plus clinical hours, right? I've got training working with everyone from special forces to D1 athletes to high powered executives. I'm trained in heart math, I'm trained in brain spotting. I've been a public facing founder here for about 11 years. STC, this podcast, is now in the top 0.5% of podcasts in the world. We're over 2 million downloads of this podcast. I started learning golf at the age of 43. So now I'm training 15 to 20 hours a week, including recovery. And so that is giving me a lot of data. I'm also something, just being frank, I'm a minority psychologist in a predominantly white sport with a specific lens on shame culture, honor culture, and the pressure that builds inside, especially as more South Asians and Asians enter the PGA and LPGA. Those conversations need to happen, and there's very few folks that are actually positioned to lead. And, I might be one of them. And why does this ultimately matter for you as a clinician? Uh, a competitor could copy the format. They cannot copy the person. So really think about what is your unfair advantage in the things that you create. What is the combination that only you have? Not just your degree, not just your specialty, the whole combination, clinical life experience plus perspective. That's where the irreplaceable work is going to live. You see, clinical design isn't about building a better practice, it's about building the one only you could build. You see, there's a safe version of returning to clinical work. Traditional private practice, familiar blueprint, clear path. For many clinicians, this is absolutely the right call. But for some of you, that blueprint is a ceiling and not a path. So if you have an unusual combination of skills, training, and life experiences, and you keep trying to fit it under a conventional mold, you'll feel a persistent restlessness be called you might be calling laziness or fear. It might be neither. It just might be that the model isn't working for you. No one is going to hand you a new model. You have to be willing to build it slowly, carefully, legally, and ethically from the inside out. So, I want to be honest about something beyond the clinical stuff. I think a lot about the life that I want to live and not just the business that I want to build. And golf for me and what it's becoming, our daughter Chloe is starting to play. She is weirdly starting to play at around the same age that I wanted to play but couldn't. And something about that I can't fully put into words yet. A sport that, again, I couldn't access as a kid now might be something I get to share with her. And I have to be honest about all of this. I have to pace myself as both a dad and as now playing golf. It's easy to over immerse. I'm aware of that. But the opportunity I see in the golf space, performance psychology and golf, yips and nervous system work, shame and honor culture in a sports that is diversifying and minority psychologists with a unique vantage point, I think there's something real there. And I'm starting to think bigger than just the retreat. Within the quiet approach is just one piece of the quiet builder ecosystem, but there's a larger vision that's forming, and Quiet Builder will eventually have books specifically to golf, but also the Quiet Builder philosophy. It has our paid newsletter, which is $97 a year, which is growing and ways of teaching this model to others, something that could scale beyond my own hours. And for me specifically, now being in my mid 40s, I'm starting to think a lot about legacy for our daughter, for the field, for the people who will come after me. I'm still figuring all of this out, but I wanted you to know, I'm really starting to think about something that's way bigger than me. As we wrap up, I wanted to share three questions for you to start to think about. What population have you spent the most time with, and what do they actually need that nobody is currently delivering? The second one is, what non clinical skills or life experiences do you have that becomes a part of the intervention itself? So for me, it's like golf or being a founder or just experience in business or a cultural lens. And for you, it could be something completely different. Have you given yourself permission to take it seriously? And the question number three is, what would you build if you weren't trying to make it look like what a therapist is supposed to offer? It's the hardest question. It's the one that I wrestle with the most, but I think it is the most important one. Now, here's as we wrap up, if I'm being honest, there have been moments where as I build this, I have wondered if I'm overcomplicating it. This is another one of these like crazy dreams, whether I should just go back to something simpler, whether this is too ambitious for where I am. I don't have a clean answer to that, but I have is a clear sense of what I'm trying to do, and a commitment to doing it slowly and carefully and transparently and with integrity. I'm not trying to build something impressive. I'm trying to just build something that feels true and aligned. Just going back to the free throw, I keep coming back to those two free throw moments. Year one, time slowed, and I saw myself missing the first shot. Year two, time slowed, and I wasn't thinking about the outcome at all. Same gym, same hands, same pressure. The difference wasn't physical. The difference was my nervous system was predicting. And here's what I've come to believe, which is that gap between your best self and your pressure self. It's not a character flaw, it's a signal. It's your nervous system telling you something hasn't been addressed with and it can be worked with. And that's what I am building toward. And one question I wanted to leave you with before we wrap up, what is your nervous system predicting about you right now? And is it telling the truth? See, the model that you weren't handed is not the only model allowed to use. And the story your nervous system tells you isn't the final one. So if something sparks something in you, please email me at melvin@sellingthecouch.com. And if you know someone this retreat could be a great fit for, this is specifically, I've categorized into three areas where there's pressure. Because there's lives on the line. So, like surgeons or even like trial lawyers, where there's capital on the line, like hedge fund managers, insurance folks, that kind of stuff. And then where there's influence on the line. So, executives, founders, athletes, that kind of space, where you've seen them quietly crumbling under pressure, looking for something that's not therapy and not a seminar. I would be just so grateful if you could share the quiet approach with them. You can have them email me at melvin@sellingthecouch.com. I'm really trying to keep this by application, just by private referral only. So individual, just it just feels like the right thing to do. And again, thank you for just being here and being willing to listen to this podcast. I'm excited to continue to share as this takes shape. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you soon. Bye.